Welcome to the VDL playoff videos. This is, the equivalent of power rankings, but for the playoffs. So we're going to start by talking about the quarterfinals. But before that, with me we have Miss Mag. Say hi, Miss Mag.
Hey everybody, how's it going?
Ah, but yeah, so with this, we're just going to talk about what ended up happening in the quarterfinals. Top eight. So here's what we got. On the left, we have the first seeds, the teams that had buys for the wild card rounds. On the team on the right are the teams that ended up winning their wild card matches. And we can start with the first one, which is your match, the against the regular season champion and Brave and the migrating Melodics, in which you were able to win 2-1. So what were your thoughts on your match, or should I start?
You can start.
Okay, so this one was a really interesting and fun match. So Brave um, basically went pretty hard into setup. They had Belly Drum, Azumarill, and Nasty Plot Spectre as their main, offensive threats. They had, some redirection support with Volcarona and Fake Out with Hitmon and Chan. And Miss Mag here had a couple of different things, but the big thing you had was Life Orb, Tornadus, Incineroar for disruption, and a choice ban as Elf. Uh, so game one, I think was ended up being really close. I you They got belly drum set up, but as the Marauders were able to pivot very well and basically get them to situations where the Azumarill, though set up at almost max HP at +6, just I think ended up only getting one kill. You were able to pivot well, make good protects, and basically nullify the setup, even though the setup was good and setup was like very good position and looked good into your team as a whole. And then I think the game ended up basically coming down to this really close end game where they ended up missing a rock slide from the Garchomp that that ended up making you letting you kind of get the win. Game two, I think, ended up being a little bit less cool. It was still pretty close, but game two, Spectre came out instead of the Azumarill, got a nasty plot up really early, and was snowballing until it got hit with a curse body activation on a Jellicent, in which it lost most of its damage output because its only other move was ground coverage, and you brought Tornadus as Elf, and so they were forced to switch out, and that switch out definitely made it get into a very close end game, which basically came down to Tornadus missing a Hurricane. And then game three was the wonderful match in which you made the soul read turn one, in which instead of faking out with in front of uh, Azumarill belly drum set, you switched out Incineroar instead of faking out into a double protect. The following turn, you explosioned with Azelf, getting the double knockout, preventing them from being able to do a belly drum setup at all, and taking the 3-2 Pokemon lead. And from there, we're able to get a pretty convincing win. So that's kind of the general breakdown. So any specific thoughts or moments or sets that you thought were interesting?
Yeah, I just want to say that, in the previous video, I know when we were talking about this matchup, people on the call were, you in particular said that this matchup was, you were wondering why I wanted this matchup. And I think not a lot is usually spoken about, especially during playoffs. Like, playing people you know is a very strong double-edged sword. They usually know how you like to prep, and they usually know what text you're going to probably wield to deal with certain threats. At the same time, the knowledge that I had of Brave being a relatively defensive player, and he likes to protect. I've said it many times, even in my own stream of this game. But I think that was probably really what inspired me to do that game three play. Because almost any other coach that I did not know as well, I might be a little bit more hesitant. So I can't really say that like it was certainly a close match, but it was closer on so many other playing fields than just like the actual like battle itself. As far as like the actual gameplay, yeah, it was the game one and the game two had like fair bits of hacks, which we love it, we hate it, but that's just how Pokemon goes. But the Azu setup, I think, would have been more devastating to me if I didn't recognize it on the immediate lead that he did it. Like I didn't specifically prep versus it, but because I was already kind of prepping hard against Azumarill in general, like having the explosion play kind of in the back. Like I thought about it, like how could I beat this? Because he got it off, and like I just kind of got a little bit lucky trying to stall it out. But going into future games in the set, I'm thinking like in the back, like what can I do to stop this if he gets it off a second time? And that kind of also inspired the Azelf explosion play because I realized that I can't stop Volcarona. I didn't bring goggles, so I gotta basically go for broke with the biggest spread move I have. So but I had a great time. GG's to Brave. He had a really strong run for his first time in the VDL. I am so freaking proud of him. Um, I just had to be the one that stopped you, and Marauder's going to top four. Let's go.
Oh yeah, no, definitely a really impressive win. And like you said, like I think knowing the coach as well, there's a couple points in which, in addition to some of the hacks, like I said, that I mentioned in my breakdown with the hurricane miss and the rock slide miss, and the curse body activation, all of those being really big. I think there was a couple of reads that ended up being really, I think the big pivotal moments that ended up affecting the match. I know game one, the Melodics had the +6 Azumarill in front of both Tornadus and Marowak, and Aquajet could kill either of them. And it basically became a 50-50 read because if they kill the Tornadus and, um, you know, if they get a kill either of them, they win pretty much. And if they don't, and both of your mons had protect, so it's basically you deciding which one to protect. You protected the Marowak. They click the Aquajet into the Marowak, and then you finish up the Azumarill. If they targeted the Tornadus instead, or you decided to protect the Tornadus and attack with the Marowak instead, they definitely win game one. And that kind of 50-50 protect read ended up being a major deciding factor. And game three, they definitely would have been very greedy, but they could have clicked um, Rage Powder Belly Drum on turn one instead of the double protect, and that probably would have lost you the game because you went with a very passive turn of switching out the Incineroar instead of doing any attacking move or a fake out. And so, I definitely think, the match came out very hard to, reading the individual coaches because there was decisions to make either of them, and I think you ended up winning most of those, and then getting a little bit lucky on on one of the matches too. But I do think that your read and into the explosion was a amazing play. And I was talking about this as well, in which I 100% would have double protected on game three because from my understanding of your team, there was nothing that punished that. However, you had the explosion, which punished it specifically.
Yeah, and I think one of the just sort of like a wrap up point. I think this is also a case of like sometimes where getting a fast KO on a mon can really deprive you of information because if I recall correctly, I don't think Azelf clicked a single move that entire set until game three. I believe it was brought in game two at the end where I was trying to pull it back and I was clicking play rough actually to try to one shot the Hitmonchan and it got faked out and shadow balled, which was fine. I don't think I did. I bring it to game one. I don't think I. Oh no, it died game one because it got KO'd by Aquajet. So he actually did not get to learn anything about the Azelf until it came onto the field really and exploded.
Yeah, and
Like he couldn't even learn if it was scarfed or not, which I think might have been something he was a little terrified by, which is probably why he didn't go to KO the Tornadoes.
oh yes, that was another read I think in game one that I think was very impactful, which was there was a fake out play and with Spectre at +1 or +2, and so Spectre, so they could have faked out Tornadus and try to kill Azelf with the Spectre, but they decided to
Hmm.
fake out and a double up into it instead of faking out the Tornadus and killing the Azelf because they were playing around something like Choice Scarf.
Yeah, and honestly, I would have probably made the same play, so I actually don't fault him for that because it is very likely that I will probably scarf Amon versus you, and you are unlikely to scarf Spectrier, like in almost any matchup, really. And I already know you're not scarf because you're clicking setup moves. But yeah, that one, I mean, he still won that game, but like he actually gave me an out by making that same play, um, which I think may have deprived him of information like going into the third game. So when
Yeah,
he saw the Azelf, like he didn't really know what to do. Like if he even thought to switch out Spectre for specifically Azumarill, I still probably would have lost that game because it would have just been a 1-for-1 trade of like me losing one of my heaviest hitters for him losing like redirection.
yeah. Oh, which that mod was definitely designed to just die, you know.
Yep.
But definitely it was a fun match. Almost certainly the most interesting match of of the week. Not only because it's the only 3 game set, but also just because so many decision trees, so many close calls, and so many like minor decisions that ended up mattering. But with that, we should move on because we talked about yours plenty enough. The next match was the Vienna Vaporeons against the Alolan Araquanids, in which the Araquanids were able to win 2-0. It was a very nice win for the Araquanids. I'll let you start because I think I talked a lot about your match.
Honestly, so like I helped KJ prep for this match, and it was really difficult at first to be able to set up the trick room for the Araquanids consistently. Mainly because I was using extraordinarily off the wall techs such as safety goggles, whirlwind, Noctile with tinted lens, moonblast, which more or less hits the super effective stuff on KJ's team for super effective, and hits the really annoying resisted stuff like the Togedemaru of like 38%. So like it I was really, I mean, we were both very happy we didn't see Noctowl, which is, something that the coach of the Vaporeon said he would basically never use again after after his match versus Brave in the regular season. But the match itself was very interesting. I feel like it really highlighted the weak point in the Vaporeon's draft, which is just not having enough for Trick Room, and they just found themselves in positions where like they couldn't. I feel like they couldn't do enough to stop KJ from doing what he wanted to do. And at the same time, I think there was a bit of hacks. Like there was like a 1 turn freeze, think like 3 or 4 hypnosis, and they were still not really able to mount like an effective offense. I think the first game was like a 4-0 or something, you know.
It was.
So I just think the matchup really just shined. Like KJ is a very strong trick room mode. Vaporeons don't, and barring using some of those techs that I used against KJ and prep, which you might not expect from, you know, a coach, just a regular coach. Like I had Iron Ball, Eerie Impulse, Lantern. Like I was running some crazy stuff because it was definitely able to win, but you know, yeah, it was a good game. And I think game 2 it was a little bit closer, but the Vaporeons, I believe they got into a unfortunate situation where like Landorus was stuck under like 1 turn of Trick Room left, and it had already protected. So like just Ice Beam was just gonna kind of end the game right there, if I recall correctly. And then Fidelix needed to survive a close combat from Grapple Lock. That just wasn't happening without like Chople. Yeah, little stuff like that.
Well, yeah. So yeah, I think last week when we talked about this matchup, I think I mentioned it, and I said I like the Araquanid side because I thought that if they were able to get Trick Room up, they were in a very convincing position, and that's basically what happened. The Vaporeon's only way to prevent Trick Room was a non-accuracy boosted hypnosis into the Slowbro. They hit it every time, but definitely not the most consistent way to break up Trick Room. And in addition to that, the Persian just didn't actually do that much damage because I think it ended up into like some of their mons because it only had foul play as its only offensive move. And so it definitely was kind of this awkward, especially with the Togedemaru sitting next to it as support. And so, I think that basically the big issue with kind of what happened was they were able to get some nice hypnosises, get some sleep turns, but they just never were able to punish the fact that the Araquanids had 1 mana sleep because of protects, switches, and then eventually Slowbro woke up, set up Trick Room, and basically made it really awkward for the Vaporeons because once Trick Room was up, they just literally can't do anything because Slowbro threatens to massive damage to almost every mon on their team. None of their mons can really kill it without double up or even triples, triple hits, and it threatened to one shot quite a few of these mons, especially with the weakness policy boost, which I believe it was weakness policy if I recall correctly.
Yep, weakness policy slow, bro.
Um,
Yeah.
but but yeah, like that's kind of the idea. I think, obviously, I think this was partially, I think it's prepped well by KJ, but I definitely think it was partially just kind of a some weaknesses that were exploited by in like the team matchup. I definitely think this matchup was definitely the the one that was I felt like was more decided on team, rather than play or hacks.
Yeah, nah, that's fair. And like I said, like it's easy to look at this matchup on paper. And yes, the Vaporeons have a like really really bad trick room mode. Like it was non-existent. But at the same time, like sometimes the hardest part about prepping for a team with an obvious weakness is tunnel visioning. Because when I brought some of those really wacky sets in prep, like I was staying in contention because I'm respecting the trick room. I think the main issue with the Vaporeons is that the hypnosis strategy, I think, while grossly inaccurate, but accurate enough for them, they needed to really guarantee a way they could still put pressure on while things were sleeping. And like just their offensive threats just weren't doing it. Like the eerie impulse in particular from the Araquanid Togedemaru just like crippled that poor Duraludon, who otherwise could have had almost some nice, really clean sweeps through what KJ brought. And then the Landorus just, obviously being weak to the Slowbro just doesn't help when the Slowbro gets speed control. And then the ice cream cone, same thing with the Graveloct. It just was like the Persian was annoying, and it was the main thing that I thought was going to make the difference, but like it still needed help, and it just didn't get the right amount of help.
Yeah. But with that, a pretty nice win in which two teams that were 4-4 and were wildcard teams made it to the semifinals, which is really impressive. But with that, we can move on to the next match, which was my match against the Bold Mashers, in which the Mashers were able to win 2-0. And this match was interesting, to say the least. I'll let you talk about it.
All right, well, I won't beat around the bush. It is unfortunate that game one, Batista's MVP, our dearly beloved Mr. Rhyme, was bred lovingly from an egg and was assigned an aguavberry as his item for this showdown against Scoomer and the Bolton Bashers. It was given a mint to be the optimal nature for the matchup, and unfortunately, the pinch berries like the aglav go off of the listed nature on the cart, which just happened to be a confusion giving nature for the particular berry, and it cost a game-winning scenario for Batista because he hit himself in confusion. Rhyme could not KO the Wheezing or bring it down to Sash, and Goomer kind of was able to pick up the pieces from there and steal a 2-0. However, I will admit, on the merits of that game one, in spite of the confusion, you still actually made it very close. I believe it was still a 1-0 for Goomer,
Yeah,
despite that
it,
real pivotal turn from loss in momentum from you.
it was a 1-0.
Uh,
And in addition to a 1-0, it was a 1-0 in which a single gear grind miss probably wins me the game, too.
Yeah. Game two, however, Goomer had this very, very good, I thought, strategy because I personally hadn't thought about it, where the Elder Gloss came in on a triple kick with Endure to make sure it lives the turn. So you triple kicked into Elder Gloss with Cotton down, and it basically put all your mons at like half speed or like -3 speed. While the Clang Clang next to Elder Gloss was completely unaffected due to Clear Body. And after the speed drop, Scoomer was just kind of able to kind of pick you off like from there with the Clang Clang and the I believe the um Pessimian, I think in the back was also providing some off the Scarf Pessimian was providing some offensive pressure against your Darmanitan.
Yeah, I think the big one, yeah, is they were able to get they had set up Kling Klang for all these matches, which was Iron Defense, Shift Gear, Gear Grind with leftovers, and so they
Hmm.
slowly gained health, got their defenses up, and got their speed and attack up, and yeah, I definitely think game two basically came down to me acknowledging they had an obvious switch, not reading the obvious switch, and then getting punished by the obvious switch. Because so for example, so for anyone who didn't watch the match or who doesn't remember, I had Darmanitan, Weavile in front of Cursula and Pessimian. Um, both of my Mons threatened to one shot both of their Mons, and I outsped both of their Mons, and so the so it was obvious that they needed to do some sort of protect because if they just attacked with both their Mons, I would be up 4-2, and there's obviously Goomer is not going to let that happen. And so I definitely think I made a mistake not making a read. And so I could have done something like Flare Blitz instead of going for the Zen headbutt into the Simian spot. I think, or I could have, done something like even, got doubled up into one of the two spots, trying to kill the switch in. I think because I definitely think if I flare blitzed with Darmanitan, I think I probably could have won that match. But basically the main strategy of my team was to get some early kills and then win with my super physically bulky Cloister, so killing their special attackers and then winning with Cloister in the back. But basically, because of their double switch on turn one, I was not able to get some early kills, and they were able to kind of get in a position where I couldn't kill their special attackers quickly enough, um, so that Cloister was kind of just forced to have to 1v3 with two special attackers left. And then, as you mentioned, the Endura on the Eldegoss being really big at saving it, and then they switched it out so it was in the back, so that my Cloister was in awkward position for with that in the back as well.
Yeah, no, I would definitely say Goomer did a very good job of positioning, and it really did, like you said, come down to the one read since he lost a very large chunk of momentum by doing the double switch on the turn one. If you had even with one mon taking advantage of that, it could have been I think easily a 3 game set, which would have of course been like super hype, and I wouldn't have been the only one for the week.
Yeah,
But yeah, as it stands, Goomer did take the 2-0, and I at least really enjoyed seeing some of his sets. I thought the Hex Will-O-Wisp Iron Defense Curso was actually like pretty cool. As a person who just enjoys Ghost Mons in general, but like he's been really taking advantage of Curso's extraordinarily unfairly wide move pool all season long, and I think that's probably one of my favorite Mons he's drafted. Even if it did freeze me in week 2, but that's in the past. But yeah, unfortunate game one on the on the prep end for you with the not knowing really how that mechanic worked. But Goomer I think took a really convincing game to win off of that. So
yeah, and
yeah,
I also think I like my one of another issue, which is with my set, was just I was really hesitant to want to bring Rhyme in game two, even though it's probably the optimal pick, because Rhyme was definitely was one of my better mons in this matchup, but I just was just too too concerned with the confusion to to acknowledge I probably should have brought it, which also probably hurt me. But it happens, and Goomer definitely prepped well and was able to get pretty nice win for them and make it to their like eighth or so semifinals.
yeah. I mean, honestly though, I don't think too many people viewing this video would fault you for not bringing the rhyme when you realize you've made a prep error of that kind of capacity, because you can't control when you get in that range necessarily, especially with gear grind being like an actual factor. So I can understand you not wanting to roll the dice on a 30% chance to basically repeat the game one mistake,
Yeah,
even
but
if it is looking good in the matchup.
oh yeah, no, definitely awkward. But with that, we can move on to the final match, which is the Pangorials versus the Bistro Bewares, in which Panda, our reigning champion, was able to win 2-0. Um, this match definitely I felt was very impressive win on Panda. But what were your thoughts on the set?
I mean, well, now we know that Panda rules the jungle. Pandas versus bears. I was waiting for this match since last week. Overall, though, I thought that it was a good match. Most people would have probably seen a lot of this team and thought, oh, Panda's like got a pretty easy match, like he's gonna win this that. But I have to admit, I think I might have said in the last week that this matchup was favorable for Panda, but there were still some really huge threats, like that Hitmonlee on the Beware's team was a humongous threat that I know he acknowledged fearing a little bit in prep. So I think the Bewares did their best to like leverage that threat, knowing that it was so good into their team. I think it ultimately still just came down to some reads as well, and I believe the Tang growth was like an MVP for this set. For the Pangorials, just being annoying with like Rage Powder and probably chipping down some of their bulkier stuff.
Yeah, I definitely think that was what I would describe as the big issue in my position. Is I think that the Bewares definitely underprepared for the Tangrowth. Tangrowth seemed like the Pangorial's main way to deal with Hitmonlee, which is a massive threat into the majority of their team because especially with the Unburden boost, with the special defense boost, it has way to cleanly one-shot Tyranitar. It has the ability to do massive damage into Primarina, and the Tangrowth just rage powder to protect their partner mons. So because I think Pre-Marina was able to one shot it even at +1 special defense. Um, and then be able to hit some sleep powders and make some timely protects. I definitely think those are just very just a clean back-to-back wins from Panda. Um, I think game two was a lot closer. I think the the Bewares ended up leading a little bit more into their Trick Room. They got Hatterene and Araquanid under Trick Room, but it ended up being a little bit awkward because a couple of Mons had to die, and so they had Trick Room up, but they were forced to bring in Hitmonlee in Trick Room with the Unburden boost, and it just looked so bad at that point.
Yeah, honestly, I'll just take just a short moment. I want to just put a little shine on Tangrowth because I feel like a lot of times it often does go underestimated simply because Tangela can have Eviolite, but like a physically bulky wall with Regenerator and Rage Powder was like the perfect recipe to deal with an offensive physical threat like Hitmonlee if that's what you're truly scared of. So I think it was definitely well prepped and brought by the Pangorials. And I also think it's quite interesting that most people would say, like, I didn't even realize that there was this battle of redirection, I think, as an angle when we first talked about this match, because it was pretty obvious that, like, Beware's been bringing a DD hat, or at least in DD all season. Like, there's very few matches you don't want to actually bring in DD to at all.
It's
But
been
yeah, it was
NDD
just
Hitmonlee all season.
right. Yeah, right, exactly. Like Indeed, him only like the whole season, but like it just goes to show you how it really just comes down to sometimes it's those mons that you don't either respect enough or they just slip under your radar that like they really can make a big difference, especially when we're talking playoffs.
Oh yeah, I think that the Bewares having one mon with rage with safety goggles probably could have made this match in from a very convincing win on Panda to either very close or maybe even a win on the Bewares. Even though Panda played and prepped really well. Like that's how, like one item is literally the difference between a win and a loss that could have been happened.
Yeah, it just like you need special pressure just dealing with Tangrowth in general. The unfortunate part is like if you're really like pigeonholing yourself into the Hitmonlee Unburden strat, which is a very viable strat, like you still can't get like any of the benefits of like safety goggles without having a partner. Like it can't really be like safety goggles Hitmonlee unless you're willing to accept being outsped, you know. But maybe that would have been a mix-up that Panda may not have prepped for. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Could have been like reckless high jump kick safety goggles. Probably would have blown holes in some of his team.
Yeah.
But yeah, good. It was a good week. I definitely called it being a more hype set of games than the previous round. These were despite there being 3-2-0s. I think there were also 3-2-0s the previous week, but it was just like there were some very interesting techs and uh, decision trees abound this week. As we go into top four.
Yeah, but congratulations to everyone who made it all the way to top eight and top four. One thing that I want to note is that we have four coaches that made it to top eight that did not who were not in VDL-V last season, which is really nice. Pretty impressive. And we have two teams that you know who wildcard teams against two first seeds that are reigning champion or not, who are previous champions. So definitely an interesting. But with that, we can talk about this upcoming week, which is the semifinals. So here are the matches. We got the Bashers versus the Lilith Araquanids, which is a rematch from week one. And then we got the Miss Magical Marauders versus the Pangorials. So, yeah. So do you have anything to say before we go into the specific matches?
Yes. The Bolton versus the Wackerers is a rematch from one of this season. Funnily enough, Marauders versus the Pangorials is actually a rematch from week one of the previous season because that is when I first actually got to face off against Panda. Just thought that was really funny to acknowledge here.
Yeah. And another thing is we got the two people two people that fighting the two previous champions of the V. So there's a chance that the finals is two champions or no champions. So very interesting. But with that, we can go to the first match, which is the Lowland Arachnids versus the Bolton Bashers. So you can see the matchup on the screen. Any thoughts on the matchup or things? I know. I guess I'll start. So week one, the Arachnids were able to beat the Bashers. The Arachnids did a belly drum physical slow bro with redirection support from Amoonguss and healing with Pollen Puff from the Amoonguss that was able to catch the Bashers off guard and was able to get a very close 3 game set. So that's just my thing. With that context, what is your thought on the matchup or the set in general?
Well, first I will acknowledge what's different. So during the first week, two members of KJ's team who are no longer here, Kadabra was here over Quillfish, and Chinchina was originally a Crawdon. So the added Intimidate support and the fast physical sweeper slash support mon, I think, is a much better recipe to deal with a lot of what Goomer may try to throw at you. Even in the week one, we can acknowledge that he leaned pretty hard on that wheezing, and I think the added tools here make that a little bit more likely. But knowing that you might be able to prep for dealing with the wheezing a little bit more in particular. That being said, I'd say it's a pretty even matchup in terms of just like the merits of itself. Like the most annoying things that unfortunately the Arachnids have to contend with are speed control elements with the weather mode and the Tornadus, but at the same time, like the while KJ not having any priority of his own in Prankster, the Bolton Bashers do have to contend with all the things that Comfy likes to do because Comfy is really an annoying mon. Just straight up, it's just a pain. So I think that kind of evens out some of the more obvious threats. And then at the slow end, they have, I would say, relatively comparable trick room modes. We've seen Goomer use that Shuckle in very interesting and very successful ways all season. So it might be able to go toe to toe with KJ's bottom three there, which is his trick room sort of firewater grouse core that he's leaned on for a bit of the season. Yeah, I can't really say I have any like real clear front runner. I don't see anything like that really glaringly stands out as like, oh, this will like definitely come or this will be like a big sweep. I think it really just come down to prep and play. What do you
Um,
think?
yeah, I definitely agree with that to a certain extent. I think that this matchup is just very interesting in the aspect that they both have clear modes that they can kind of lean on and which the other team really doesn't like. And they have answers to and each people have answers to those same issues. So, for example, like you said, the Trick Room mode, which the Arachnids have really liked, the Cursula honestly is pretty good into Slowbro. It has stab, super effective damage into it. It has a pretty good special defense stat. So it has the ability to do pretty well into the Slowbro. Where on the same sense, uh, Bashers, yes, they can set up Trick Room themselves, but Amoonguss could be really annoying into the Cursula or the Slowbro or whatever else you have in the Trick Room. And then the same idea, the Bashers they can do Tailwind stuff, but the Arachnids have answers to that, and the fact that they have Fake Out, they have +3 priority with the Comfy, and they have the ability to also just set up Trick Room. So I definitely think this is just the team composition just puts it into a situation where it's going to be very focused on adapting, having good prep, and playing really cleanly, which makes it hard for me to vote too much against the Bashers as being a 2 time champion and being infamous for coming up with crazy sets and playing very well.
Listen, I've been in VDL for a little bit, so and I've been following Goomer in other leagues. I give all the props in the world to him. His skill is real, his luck is realer. But I love watching him play and prep. He is always something interesting. So as much as I want to disagree with you, I can't. But I also have to root for my boy KJ because I think KJ can definitely whip up some spice and go toe to toe with Goomer in this rematch
Yeah.
once more. One other thing I think, which I find very interesting in this matchup, team comp wise, is both of their fake out mons are both of the electric and rodent variety, which I find very interesting. And they also both have lightning rod. So I know that there are matches where, actually, conversely, compared to Goomer, who I don't think has brought Pikachu very much outside of like the maybe like the first couple of weeks, the Araquanids have leaned on Togedemaru like for practically the latter half of the season, which is why they started racking up a lot of wins. So I think even just seeing that dynamic might be like really interesting when it comes down to game day.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree. But with that, we can go to the next match, which is the only other match, which is your match against the Pangorials. Um, do you want to start, or should I start with on the thoughts of the matchup?
You can start.
So similarly, okay, so at this point of the season, all the teams that are left have really good teams. So obviously, it's hard to be like, this team is a massive advantage or not. I think that some of the tricky things for you is they have competitive Defiant Mons on their team, and so despite having a lot of Mons you want to intimidate with your Incineroar, which has been your big Mon, they have multiple ways to punish it with those two abilities. And so I definitely think that's one big concern for you is that a Mon that you've kind of leaned on very heavily makes could be a little bit tricky. In addition to that, I do like I do think that just the sand mode can be pretty tricky to you to a certain extent. You don't have any. Um, However, the Klefki can do really work with there. So it's like I don't know. Like other than the Incineroar type thing, I see kind of strengths on both of y'all's side. I know they've been leading a little bit on like the Primarina and a little bit of some Trick Room, the Fangorials. However, you've really liked Marowak, and Marowak can do pretty well into some of their Trick Room mons, namely the like Tyranitar. And even though I don't think it necessarily can one shot, it can do massive damage to Primarina and underspeeds it in Trick Room. Even the Sand mode can do really scary, but you have the ability to reset the rain, the weather at priority rank speed with the Klefki, so you can do sunny day rain dance to kind of undo that. Um, you know, uh, I don't know, like definitely some things on both sides. I'm not sure who I would necessarily give an advantage, if anyone. I think that um, you know your team has some. I feel like I don't know. It's tough. I'm not sure my thoughts. So what I'll let you go.
All right. Well, I'll start out by saying that every round I have internally, at least usually before the wheel is drawn, I have usually identified the match or the coach that I would either want to play the most and I want to play the least. However, being that it is top four, you get really slim pickings, and everybody's team is scary, and every coach is scary for making it this far. I'll admit I didn't really want to play. I didn't want to play this team because it is very annoying for me, who is pretty much leaned on Incineroar all season because Intimidate is a really funny ability. And they have, not even gonna disrespect the fact that they also have an inner focus mon in the form of Glalie, which can be very annoying to the other thing that likes to come alongside Incineroar, which is Tornadus. So like they have a lot of anti-Incineroar tools, but I still think it's a even enough matchup. Like again, it's also funny that Incineroar is facing off against Torracat. That's just this is so much fun, like so much fun stuff. Like both there's sand and the champs both have sand also going in the top four. They have like a bulky water. Like it's just such a funny like top four, like from so many perspectives. But as far as this matchup is concerned, I don't really see like there being a super clear dominant pathway for either team. Like, yeah, my trick room mode has better offensive pressure than theirs, but like set of Coffin is like not even a joke, and Tangrowth and Trick Room is also something to be respected. God forbid he does like Iron Ball Premium or anything. Not trying to give him no ideas, of course, but I think it's definitely going to be coming down to again like how it's prepped and also more importantly how it's played. I will say that I do feel like having gotten my team to this top four scenario and feeling pretty confident in piloting it, that I do feel confident enough that I can win this matchup, but I know Panda is a champion for a reason, and I've spoken to him on many occasions. He's not going to make it easy, and I'm just super excited to play him again, straight up.
Oh yeah, no, this definitely should be a fun match. I definitely think that you'll both have some pretty nice bulky offensive mons, some frailer, super, high massive damage mons, and the intimidate fake out mon. Like I definitely I definitely think, I can see this going either way. I think it's gonna, like you said, be very, very dependent on that. You know, I don't, I think that I could also see pretty much all 22 of these mons see the field as well. On top of that, there's no mon that seems like, oh, this definitely is not going to come. I could definitely see every single one coming.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it difficult from a prep perspective for. Well, I can only speak for me, obviously, but for me, I could also all 22 of these mons come. Like every mon that's been drafted on either side is a threat, especially given that it's top four. Like this is not the time really to be caught too far off guard by something you didn't expect.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. But with that, I think that is the end of the our discussion of the semifinals of the VDL-V. Any final thoughts before we move on and close it out?
Yeah, I mean, it's champs versus non-champs. I think how this week will play out will be make for a very interesting final. As we talked about, we could have double champ final, we could have no champ final, we could have one and one, and then like you throw in this dynamic of like Panda's like the most recent champion, Goomer's been a two-time champion. Me and KJ have been prepping together for years. Like we should just make this a multi-battle. Like just do the screw the top four, just make a multi-battle right here, and like there's your finals, like easy.
Uh,
Goomer and Panda versus me and KJ multi battle. There's your finals. No top four, But uh, in all seriousness, like I didn't personally think I would even make it to top four. So like I'm really happy and I'm just excited to just give it my best.
oh yeah, no, no, definitely a nice run for you. You definitely had you did not have the greatest start of the season, and finishing all the way up here so far is really impressive. And Panda making it semifinals, back-to-back seasons, and possibly finals and back-to-back seasons is also really impressive. All of y'all, you and all the other three, coaches in the final four should be really, proud of yourselves because y'all did such a good season. You played so well, and you drafted really good teams, as we can see. But with that, I think we can sign off. So thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and we will talk about what happened in the semifinals next week. See you.